Hello everyone, I'm Aaron, a birding naturalist. Welcome to my channel. American crows are amazing, and one of the things they do that's really interesting is this kind of behavior. These mass night roosts in the wintertime. American crows are a member of the Corvus family, and as is typical of the entire family, incredibly intelligent and very social creatures. And one of these really interesting, very social behaviors that they have is in the wintertime, they gather into huge flocks to spend the night together. So, a few ideas of why they might do this. One is protection, the safety in numbers. And certainly there are more predators of crows that are active in the nighttime often than in the daytime. So, it's the high risk area. They're sleeping, sort of vulnerable. Another is warmth. They do this in the wintertime. It's cold. And if you put a bunch of crow bodies and into a single tree, everyone gets a little bit warmer. So that's a nice boost. And another idea of why they do this is an entire suite of social interactions. So everything from just playing with each other. They play. And when you watch crows in a night roost, especially as they're gathering or just as they're leaving, there's a lot of what looks like just sort of jostling around kind of play. Mates are sometimes found in night roosts. Adult birds, when they come together, will find each other and decide, I think this year maybe we should get together. And so they will go off and mate together for that year. And another reason that crows may very well group together, a sort of social benefit from gathering together, is information sharing. If a crow comes back with a nice full gorge, right? The crop of a bird is in its throat, and it's sort of a temporary food storage pouch in its esophagus. And if a bird comes back with a nice full crop, the other birds around it might say, wherever that bird was, apparently had food. Maybe we should go follow it tomorrow morning. So it's a way of sort of exchanging social information for where the good eating is. So lots of great benefits from crows gathering together into night roosts. Now, night roosts are usually in large trees and often in sets of large trees. I'm here in downtown Sacramento, and there is a very impressive night roost here where many of the large trees along the city streets get just loaded with crows. It's very impressive. And when I say loaded with crows, these night roosts can get big. Sometimes they're smallish, numbering in the hundreds. Sometimes they can be in the thousands. This one here is easily 10,000 birds. And people have found crow night roosts that measure into the hundreds of thousands. So these can be a lot of birds. These can be huge night roosts. Now, they are sort of mostly temporary in some ways, and they last in others. And what I mean by that is, in the wintertime is when most birds seem to gather into a night roost if they're going to. Juveniles, adults, lots of birds gather together into a night roost during the winter, during the non-breeding season. So in most of the United States and Canada, that's sort of November through March. During the rest of the year, adult birds will disperse. They'll leave the night roost. They will not participate in this behavior, and they'll go off and establish their own little territories and hang out by themselves. Some juveniles will also leave the night roost, and some will stay and use it year-round. So it definitely gets smaller, and sometimes they completely dissipate in the breeding season. So in that way, they're kind of temporary. They're kind of seasonal. They get very big in the wintertime, and then smaller or even non-existent in the summertime. They are persistent, though, in that winter after winter, the same area, the same cluster of trees will get used as a night roost over and over and over again for years and years and years. Basically, it seems like they will just keep on coming back to the same group of trees unless the crows get disturbed, unless there's a massive disturbance during the winter sometime and kind of scares them all off. Then they often will not come back the following winter. They'll be like, okay, that was weird, that didn't go well, we're not going to repeat that. Smart birds. And, where do these birds come from, right? Like 100,000 crows, that's a lot of crows. And sure enough, crows from as far away as 50 miles will gather together, sort of a 50-mile radius circle of all the crows that live there will sort of suck in and concentrate into a single night roost sometimes. And so that's why they can get so big. So maybe an hour or so before sunset, the crows will start to fly in, gathering, getting closer and closer and closer to that sort of central location. Sometimes groups of them will stage in areas away from the night roost, but sort of gather into clusters, and then that whole cluster will come together and fly into the night roost. But the overall concentration is that a large area of birds, or a large area's worth of birds, will come together. And like I said, hour before sunset, right around sunset, that's when they all fly in, gather into those trees. There is definitely some sort of social hierarchy of where a bird sits, but no one has actually really figured out exactly where that hierarchy lands or how it works or what it looks like. It does seem like there's probably reason to believe that maybe the very topmost birds are perhaps the most vulnerable to predation, and perhaps the most vulnerable to cold because they're sort of on the exposed upper edges. Whereas the lowest birds are probably going to get pooped on the most. And so maybe there's some space in sort of the middle that is like the high commodity, high social dominance area, and lower sort of social status birds get pushed to the margins in some way. But that's all very hypothetical, and no one has really looked into the social dynamics of American crow night roosts yet. So it's an area of animal behavior that is it's ripe for the picking. It'd be an awesome study. I'll bet we'd learn a ton. So it's an amazing, it's an incredible behavior to watch. After they gather together, all the jostling, all whatever social positioning goes on, they very noisily sort of find their positions, then eventually settle down, and eventually they go to sleep. And that's a really amazing thing to see too. Walking underneath a tree that's filled with like 5,000 sleeping crows is kind of crazy, kind of amazing. And they sleep all night long, and then come dawn, they start to, basically reverse the entire process. Birds start to wake up, they start to get noisy, start calling to each other. You can start watching sort of one bird at a time fly from maybe tree to tree, and then maybe it's 2 or 3 birds, and then it's small groups, and then more and more and more of them are waking up and moving around, and then they all start sort of lifting off in big clouds of crows to fly out of the night roost and then disperse across the landscape that they came from the day before to, again, go out, forage for food, spend their winter day doing whatever crows like to do in the winter. Before, again, a productive day, hopefully, doing their thing, sunset starts to come on and they come back and rejoin the night roost. So if you have a night roost around you, you probably know, because they can be very loud, but it's a really cool thing. Go out and enjoy them. Enjoy them before they all sort of break apart, and you have to wait for the breeding season to end for this amazing behavior to start to re-emerge sort of in force. So it's a little bit about American crows, American crow behavior, and in particular, these winter night roosts that they engage in. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for the view. Subscribe to the channel, and until next time, enjoy the natural world.